Well, let's turn our attention now to the legacy of June 12, which is once again under scrutiny following former Governor Lamido's claim that President Tinubu supported the annulment of the 1993 election. The presidency, of course, has fired back, calling it a distortion of history. In a detailed rebuttal, Presidential Advisor Bayo Onanuga insists President Tinubu condemned the annulment even before Abacha's coup and dismissed claims that his mother mobilized support for the military. So what's the truth behind this heated historical dispute? Let's bring in OSA director, veteran journalist, constitutional lawyer, and a man who himself paid the price for democracy under the Abacha regime to help us separate fact from fiction. Thanks for joining us on the program this evening. We have just about 10 minutes, but let's start with the controversy. As someone who lived and fought through the June 12 era, how do you react to this development? Was Bola Tinubu a key player in the early days of the pro-democracy resistance, or do Lamido's claims carry any weight?
Frankly speaking, it will amount to falsification of history and a distortion of the immutable facts of history to state that President Bola Tinubu did not contribute to fight for the annulment of June 12, or did not contribute to the struggle for democracy that started after the annulment of June 12, 1992 presidential election, which was widely acclaimed to have been won by Chief MQ Abiola. I've always told a lot of my colleagues that these are part of the challenges I have with elite politics in Nigeria. Our political elites tend to approximate the emotion of the president to distort historical facts for the fact that you would disagree with the way and manner President Bola Tinubu is running the country right now. It's not an excuse to wish away his democratic credentials and his contribution under the in the period under reference. So I would say, frankly speaking, that that is not true. President Bola Tinubu was a frontline member of the National Democratic Coalition, and even before then, as a reporter for one of the pro-democracy magazines, that's Tell magazine, I had the opportunity to occasionally report the National Assembly from Abuja. If you will recall, then self-styled military president Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, famously known as IBB, embarked on a convoluted transition program and was unwilling to hand over power, which made pro-democracy magazines like Tell, The News, and Temple to start screaming from the rooftop that this man is intent on not leaving or handing over power to civilian regime. And in the process, he put in what you can call a darkical arrangement, where you have civilian governors and you have a National Assembly. A National Assembly was sworn in on November 14, 1992, and Bola Tinubu was a senator representing Lagos State. I vividly recall one particular incident that after the annulment of June 12, the Senate was sharply divided between pro-democracy forces and military apologists. And Bola Tinubu was one of the pro-democracy forces. And the then Senate President, Iyorchia Ayu, was on the part of the pro-democracy forces. I remember this particular debate on the floor of the House that Bola Tinubu was so emotional that he almost physically attacked. And the man who later became governor of Borno State, Ali Modu Sheriff, who was on the other side, that they cannot and they should not remove or impeach Iyorchia Ayu as Senate President. Of course, finally, they did, and Ahmed Bute was sworn in as Senate President. So I'm saying that even before Nandeko coalition came into existence, when the June 12 was immediately annulled, and when the National Assembly was still in place, Bola Tinubu showed those flashes and effusions of a Democrat by insisting that we must ensure that June 12 is de-annulled.
For the former governor, Sule Lamido, he did suggest that many of the prominent Nadeko figures only emerged after Abacha took over. So In your recollection, how did the resistance evolve from June 12 through the Babangida transition and into the Abacha years? And who, in your opinion, were the real frontliners at each stage?
Yeah, to a large extent, he has some, there's a lot of truth in what he said in that regard. And that was because some of the Nigerian political elites were still believing, an average politician is always hopeful. They were thinking Babangida would truly hand over power. So the majority of those who resisted Babangida and saw through the smoke screen from the beginning were mainly the pro-democracy media organizations. Tel Magazine, The News, Tempo, then Punch, and The Guardian. And they suffered severe consequences for it. And you also have the brilliant and dogged members of the civil society. People like Olisak Bakoba, Chief Gani Fawemi, Bekor and Sonkuti, and young talks like Sylvester Dion Haine, Kimo Bani, Bamdele Aturu, Richard Akiola, and the rest. So I would say that initially, the coalition that fought and resisted military rule were not the politicians. We have to be fair. They were the students. The student then, National Association of Nigerian Students was very vibrant, where you have young men then like Mahmoud Aminu, the president of NAS. They were sentenced to jail multiple times for resisting the military, for even resisting the structural adjustment program. So I would say conclusively, and without fear of equivocation, that it was the students, the civil society, and the pro-democracy media organization that I earlier highlighted that formed the bulk of resistance, the bulwark to military rule. It was really after the annulment of the election that the politicians, their eye became open and clear that yes, truly and truly, what these young men in the media and civil society have been saying is true.
Absolutely.
Then they now decided to form an umbrella body. That's why it was named National Democratic Coalition, NADECO, so as to pilot and drive the process of terminating military rule.
I hear you clearly, Mr. Director, but there's a deeper issue here beyond President Tinubu. Are you concerned that Nigeria's democratic history is being politicized or even rewritten by those in power today? How do we guard against that kind of historical revisionism?
Yes, I am very, very and deeply worried. And that's why I've told most of my colleagues who participated in that era that we can't be alive and allow revisionists to rewrite our history for us. And that every one of us who played a role then should put pen on paper and also state the role you played. I want to say without any iota of doubt that I was lucky to have been at the center of the struggle for democracy as a journalist then. There is no Nigerian journalist that interviewed and interacted with NADECO abroad more than I did. I practically interviewed every member, interacted with every member of the National Democratic Coalition who were in exile in the United States and United Kingdom, from Chief Anthony Nahoro to Senator Bola Tinubu, as he then was, to General Ani Akirande, Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, Chief John Odige Oyegun, and my main man, Senator Tokunbo Afikuyomi. And they were even joined by young Nigerian professionals who were already based abroad. People like Professor Chidi Odinkalu, Kayode Fayemi, Ike Okonta, who was initially in the news and now went abroad. People like the late Oronto Douglas, So I am in a position to be concerned, and I'm also in a position to say I can identify at least 80% of the young men and women, and even the elders who participated in that democratic era. I remember that I interviewed Senator Bola Tinubu, as he then was, in the United Kingdom in April 1996. When I was coming back to Nigeria, I was arrested along the NADECO route, and I was detained for about 5 hours. I had to buy my way out with all the foreign currency I had. So in 1997, when I got back to UK, they said Bola Tinubu had relocated to US. I went to the US, and on the 29th of May, because it was my birthday, 1997, I interviewed Bola Tinubu again in his house in Bowie, Maryland.
All right.
And we published that article in Tel where he said, Abacha told me he voted for MKO Abiola. So we know those who participated in the
Mr.
struggle for
Director,
democracy.
you are a national treasure yourself. I mean, we have to keep this conversation going. We are lucky to still have you. And of course, we're going to find time to continue this conversation so that we can separate fact from fiction and also get the narrative right. But we're completely out of time now. But be sure that this is a conversation we have to keep having. Veteran journalist and constitution lawyer, OSA Director, thank you so much for joining us on Beyond the Headlines. And that's our show today, everyone. You can watch it again at midnight and at 6 a.m. tomorrow. I am Nifemi Oguntoye.